Damas y caballeros, ladies and gentlemen, if you all could take a seat, please, because we're about to start with our workshop on AI and novel data at the service of the institutions that we work for. We're very happy to have you here. I would like to say up front that this workshop is really about using AI and novel data within our banks or institutions, rather than about what we're financing. We've all heard about ChatGPT. Most of you have used it by now, I suppose. But actually, we're going to talk about much more than that. We're going to use about satellite data, about images, and you will see, we will talk about how to use it when actually assessing your environmental impact, to actually making everybody's life easier so that you can avoid the boring tasks. We have today Mr. Ricardo Mourinho Felix, the Vice President of the EIB since 2020. He has the oversight of the bank's funding and treasury, economic analysis and research activities, as well as of lending operations supporting the blue economy, EIB's migration response, as well as those in support of the EU programs as RRF, InvestEU, and Just Transition Mechanism in the context of the European Green Deal. He also oversees the relations with rating agencies, national promotion institutions, OECD, and think tanks. Before joining the EIB, Mr. Mourinho Felix was Deputy Minister and Secretary of State of Finance in Portugal for 5 years. He holds a Master's in Economics at the Nova School of Business. He will now give us the opening remarks.
Good morning, dear all. Thank you very much. Be welcome to this groundbreaking workshop on artificial intelligence and novel data for public development banks. So as we gather here today, innovators, policymakers, and financial leaders, we all share a vision that technology can be a very powerful force for societal good if used wisely. And the impact of artificial intelligence and new data sources is becoming increasingly evident. The private sector, as usually, has led the way, showing us how to make most of big data and from machine learning in areas that go from customer services to advanced fraud detection. But let's not limit our view on artificial intelligence to just language models like so well-known ChatGPT. Technologies such as computer vision can help us in analyzing deforestation from satellite images. Mobility data can help us to understand gender-specific impacts of infrastructure projects that we finance. And Professor Rolnick will later discuss how these new types of data and techniques can help us, especially in assessing the environmental impacts of our projects. At the European Investment Bank, we have started to turn this potential into action. We are using machine learning to become more efficient, to become more cost-effective, and to improve our services across the various functions of the bank. For example, our anti-money laundering efforts now include an algorithm that matches SWIFT transactions, ensuring that the names in the transactions are fully aligned with our store data, even if the matches are not exact. This improves the accuracy of our fraud detection systems. And in our economics department, we use natural language processing to analyze the global news on a daily basis. And this helps us to identify the potential sovereign and environmental risks, which we then incorporate into our risk models. So we use natural language processing to examine also job platforms, use it to assess LinkedIn, and to assess the impact on initiatives like Boost Africa program on youth and female entrepreneurship in sub-Saharan Africa. Additionally, we have embraced the use of large language models in specific applications. We have developed a chatbot for data search within documents that ensures privacy, as well as an automated report generation system. And you'll get to see more about these initiative projects in the video that we'll show after the presentation. But let's be realistic. This journey towards technological adaptation is not free of challenges. Good quality data is hard to come by, and inconsistencies can well affect and influence the outcomes. And we also need to acquire new talent, and train our current staff to keep up with these rapidly changing technologies. Infrastructure is another key aspect. As a solid hardware and software and integrity of the softwares are key for artificial intelligence projects. And let's not forget the importance of data privacy, especially within the framework of the European General Data Protection Regulation. So, what's our game plan? We plan to join the Development Data Partnership, which it will be discussed in greater detail. We are committed to fairness, non-discrimination, and explainability in artificial intelligence, topics that the IDB Lab will further elaborate on. And finally, we are adopting a tier gradual approach that combines our in-house expertise with collaborative efforts to overcome the challenges that we face in this journey. In summary, the road ahead might be complex, but it's certainly a journey that will continue. We'll transform these challenges into stepping stones for our progress through a very careful planning, through collaboration with you, and through continuous learning. And in fact, what is life if not a continuous learning process? Dear all, artificial intelligence and novel data sources have the potential to revolutionize how public development banks operate. And we are not just recipients of technological process. We are, in fact, responsible architects of this process. By learning and by working together, we can overcome these challenges and unlock the immense potential of these technologies and benefit from it. I thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to the fruitful discussions and to the future collaborations in this workshop, and more importantly, beyond this workshop. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have a keynote by Professor David Rolnick, who is an assistant professor and Canada CFIR AI chair in the School of Computer Science at McGill University and at the Mila Quebec AI Institute. He is a co-founder and chair of Climate Change AI and scientific co-director of Sustainability in the Digital Age. He received his PhD in applied math from MIT, and he was named to the MIT Technology Review's 2021 list of 35 innovators under 35. If you haven't checked out the Climate Change AI website yet, I highly recommend doing so. In addition to great resources and a wonderful place for networking, they actually have great courses for free. So if you want to learn a bit more about how to apply AI to climate change, anywhere from energy to whatever, to deforestation, whatever, please check it out. Do we have him? It's working? Hey, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be there with you virtually. Can you hear me all right? I'm going to take that as a yes. Hopefully you can see my slides right about now. Excellent. So I thought I would kick off the session by talking about what AI really is, because this is a term that gets floated a lot now, and people mean a lot of different things when they say AI. Increasingly, people mean specifically ChatGPT, but there's a lot more AI out there, and essentially everything I'm going to be talking about is not ChatGPT or large language models at all, because most of AI isn't that. AI is a really broad term. It essentially means just any computer algorithm that makes predictions, recommendations, or decisions on the basis of a defined set of objectives. That's the OECD official AI definition, and that encompasses a lot of different things. In particular, much of AI now is machine learning. Those are a specific kind of AI algorithms that infer patterns from data. They're not told explicitly what to do. Instead, you provide the computer with data, and the computer finds patterns in that data that will help it make predictions on new data. Machine learning techniques have become especially effective in recent years, thanks to deep learning, which is also known as neural networks, and that's a particular kind of machine learning. Those are some definitions. Now, what are the strengths of AI, and in particular machine learning, since much of AI now is machine learning? AI and machine learning are very good at performing straightforward tasks quickly and automatically. If it is a task that a human could do but would take a really long time to scale up, that could be a good task for automation with machine learning. For example, looking at satellite images across the whole Earth. Finding subtle patterns in large data sets. If you have a really big data set and you would like to parse it in such a way that you can pick out something useful, that is also something machine learning is really good for, because it can really scale up. Optimizing a complicated system, where there are many different knobs that you might want to turn. If you know that system, if you have a simulation of it, or if you have control over the system itself, so you can see what happens if you change it, that is a good situation for machine learning. Again, assuming you understand the system. We couldn't optimize something like human society, which is far too complex. Weaknesses of machine learning include, since it uses data, it is very sensitive to problems in that data. If the data is bad, if the data is biased towards certain geographies or communities, that can be perpetuated in the algorithm. Machine learning can't think outside the box. It is able to do what you ask it to do, hopefully, but doesn't extend beyond what it's seen in the past in terms of its data. And that's dangerous because sometimes we think that something that can perform so intelligently must be able to generalize and think broadly about the world like a human can. That is not the case with machine. And it generally can't explain its reasoning. Now, why is all this relevant to climate change, which is the focus of my own work? There are many different ways in which machine learning can be relevant to climate action. There is a 100-page report that we wrote called Tackling Climate Change with Machine Learning, where you can look at all the many different ways that machine learning is relevant to sectors, from power systems to heavy industry in the climate context. But I'd like to talk about just some themes that we see across all of these different areas. The first theme is gathering information. Machine learning is really good at taking a task and scaling it up. And that is really useful when you're trying to gather data to inform decisions, for example, policy decisions. That can be seen, for example, in applications that are already present, machine learning used to analyze satellite imagery in finding flood risks, assessing flood risk for coastal communities, or after there have been catastrophic events. In forest monitoring, where there is a need for quantitative assessment of carbon stock in order to incentivize various land management choices, and many more. The second theme is in improving operational efficiency. There are often complex automated systems which can be made more efficient thanks to machine learning techniques. Smart grids, various ways of controlling the electrical grid using machine learning informed techniques, or combinations of humans and machine learning algorithms working together. Heating and cooling systems. There are smart thermostats in buildings now, in personal homes, which use machine learning to use less energy in heating your home. That is increasingly being used at larger scale for large commercial or industrial buildings. And also in transportation, where transportation networks can be optimized, for example, to increase intermodality and use of low carbon modes of transport. Forecasting is a really useful application of machine learning, predicting what agricultural yield is going to be based upon past data, or predicting electricity demand to help balance the electrical grid and ensure there's enough power for everybody. Speeding up simulations. Oftentimes, there are very computationally intensive simulations for climate, weather, or electricity, where these models are very accurate. We know how the climate is changing, but that can sometimes take a very long time to run, maybe months on a supercomputer for a climate simulation. Speeding that up is a good opportunity for machine learning. It's not as accurate as the physics, but it can be much faster sometimes. And then accelerating the process of scientific discovery itself, helping suggest, for example, new materials for clean tech applications like catalysis or carbon capture or photovoltaics. In these cases, machine learning is not replacing experimentation, but it's suggesting new experiments to try in the lab, so you don't have to try as many. There's some overall themes across all of these applications, which you can think about. First of all, AI is not some silver bullet. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, and AI is certainly not going to solve climate change or even any one of these problems. It is one tool that should be used carefully in conjunction with other tools, and it shouldn't distract from lower tech solutions. Second, impactful applications often aren't flashy. We hear a lot about AI in the news. Generally, that AI is not the AI that's actually useful in fighting climate change. For example, self-driving cars get a lot of press, but predictive maintenance on railroads is actually much more impactful from a climate perspective. Flashy techniques in machine learning, like large language models, they actually aren't often as relevant as you might think from a climate change perspective. None of these applications that I've mentioned actually use large language models or natural language processing at all. There are some applications, but most of the AI that's out there and is actually being used isn't the flashy kinds of AI that you see in the news. I should also mention, it's mostly also outside of big tech. It's companies that are realizing, oh, we can use AI impactfully in optimizing our factory operations, in detecting faults, in gathering data to throw into our from our sensor networks. And those applications are really not, they're not within the tech industry exactly, they're across lots of other industries. So it's really worth remembering that the stakeholders one hears about as the AI leaders are not actually the AI leaders when it comes to using AI on the ground in ways that are making people's lives better. And they're not even necessarily the experts there. There are lots of startups that are working on AI solutions for very specific sectors, like AI for steel or AI for cement. And those are often the players that one should look to for innovation in this area. The final point that I want to make here is that multi-stakeholder collaboration is essential. The tech industry has a history of great hubris in thinking that we can solve other industries' problems, and that is really destructive. Oftentimes, that can actually distract from useful innovation and progress. And to make progress in this area, we need to bring different stakeholder communities together and different kinds of expertise together. I want to close by talking about some policy recommendations where we worked with the Global Partnership on AI, which is the OECD's governance of AI body, to provide recommendations for how to shape policy to facilitate AI in the climate change space. Really quickly going over a few of our recommendations: improving data standards and data sharing via data task forces and platforms. This is really fundamental to ensuring that data being collected is shared appropriately, meets certain standards, and is being used to benefit everyone. Impact-driven support for AI innovation. Oftentimes, AI is motivated by what's cool or what's new, rather than by what's actually impactful for society. That should change. Cross-sectoral innovation centers. It's really important to bring together different stakeholder communities to ensure that the innovation is being driven by where it will actually be used, by combining the people who will be innovating with the people who will be using. Building AI capacity and literacy so people understand where AI is and is not relevant, and are able to integrate that into their own work via upskilling and secondment programs. Ensuring best practices for participatory design, because again, understanding stakeholder needs is really crucial to innovation in this space. And thinking about technology development overall with a climate impact lens. For example, going back to those self-driving cars, they're actually probably going to make climate change worse. We're designing new technology based upon existing structures of behavior in society, which are favoring personal vehicles. But if we thought about innovation more radically, thought about how we could use autonomous driving to facilitate public transportation or freight, scaling up low carbon freight, that could actually be much more impactful from a climate impact perspective. And self-driving personal vehicles are likely to make climate change worse. Okay, I have given a lot of thoughts on both the nature of the space and on recommendations. If you're interested in more information, I encourage you to check out Climate Change AI, which is a global nonprofit catalyzing work in this area. We have a multi-stakeholder network bridging different sectors and stakeholder communities, lots of information from reports to tutorials, courses, grants, and discussion platforms, and we host events regularly across different communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Rolnick. Your first recommendation was at the end to improve data sharing, and that's actually what the next presentation is all about. So we're going to have next Holly Krambeck from the World Bank. She's the Data Lab program manager there, And she basically runs the Development Data Partnership, which is a wonderful initiative we'll hear a bit more about. The IDB is currently part of it. And actually, we at the EAB also hope to be a part of it very soon. Prior to her current assignment, she was a World Bank task team leader responsible for a portfolio of transportation infrastructure loans. She holds a Master of Science in Transportation and a Master of City Planning from MIT. Holly, do we have you there?
Yeah. Hi.
Perfect. Hi, Holly. Perfect. The floor is all
Wonderful.
yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored and excited to be here virtually with everyone. In the opening remarks, it was noted that good data is hard to find, and I could not agree more. Especially when it comes to artificial intelligence applications, the quality of our models is heavily dependent on the quality of our data, and much of those data reside in the private sector. But accessing data from the private sector is fraught with challenges. First, finding the data, which data set held by which company can hold the answers to your problem. And when you find that data set, securing the rights to use those data can often involve many months of legal negotiations. And then receiving and storing the data pose engineering challenges in terms of being able to transfer large data securely and minimizing your costs, because it could be very expensive. And then there's challenges with processing and analyzing the data, requiring specialized expertise and also policies to ensure privacy is respected. There are challenges in interpreting the data results. When we receive data from the private sector, we don't always know exactly how the data were collected, like we do with administrative data. And there's a responsibility in how we tell others to interpret these results. And finally, there are challenges in ensuring there's enough budget set aside and know-how to train others to replicate the analysis so that the effort doesn't just go towards one project. The Development Data Partnership was set up to solve these challenges in the most efficient manner possible. It's a partnership between international organizations and companies created to solve development challenge through data and data science collaboration. It's pinned on a legal foundation. We sign memorandums of understanding between different international organizations, which enable us to collaborate for economies of scale. And we also have a standard data license agreement that we sign with companies. So if IDB signs an agreement with LinkedIn, all the other organizations, World Bank, OECD, UNDP, can sign this same agreement with LinkedIn, taking months of legal churn and turning it into weeks. We have a data marketplace for matching staff projects to the data sets that could support their projects. We manage a shared and secure IT architecture for managing data storage and access management. We curate data goods so that when one team and one organization completes a project, their code and their methods could be adopted by staff from other organizations. And we have a data governance system to ensure that our projects are aligned with our principles on responsible and secure data use. So far, we are 8 organizations, as mentioned, including IDB, and it would be so fun to see European Investment Bank in this little blank area right here. We are very excited. And we have signed pro bono data sharing agreements with nearly 30 companies. These companies cover social media, search, geospatial, transport, internet connectivity, and many others. The way it works is first, one of our international development organizations will sign our standard data license agreement with some of our companies. And then the staff will use the intranet portal to identify the data sets that could serve their project, and then they complete a proposal form. So they submit one form for their project. They can include as many data partners and data sets as they like. When they submit the form, the data partners will review and approve, And when they approve, there's a legal magical thing that happens in the background where these proposal use cases are appended to the data license agreement, and then our team will facilitate access to the data for those staff. And we also maintain a pretty robust set of data resources because many of these larger data sets can be very complicated to use, so that no staff has to start from scratch. We document everything. We have sample data, code snippets, information about how to efficiently process and use the data, and other resources for the teams. And then finally, we curate what we call data goods. These are the best projects that lend themselves the most readily to reproducibility by other organizations. In terms of projects and community, we've supported more than 250 projects to date. We're very proud of that. A very large number has been in response to crises such as conflict and COVID and natural disasters, because we found that the private sector data is so frequent and granular, it can help fill in gaps so that governments can make decisions quickly. Our projects, they span a pretty large gamut. We have colleagues who've used metadata, the Future of Business Survey, to better understand wage gaps in industries. We have a team in Argentina who analyzed Twitter sentiment data and correlated that with heat waves and showed that people get very angry the hotter the weather gets. And a team in Bogota that used traffic data from Waze and Mapbox to support one of their urban plans. And then, as I mentioned, these data are also frequently used for crises, such as work done in Syria in response to the Turkey earthquake and Ukraine. We organize a ton of events to link staff of all of our member organizations with the companies, so they can learn about the resources and get ideas on how they could be used to improve their work. And I think I'm out of time, so I'm just going to skip through and just say, why don't you come to our website, datapartnership.org, where you can learn more. And yeah, I think that's it. Really excited about our program and welcoming EIB and seeing what we can do together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Holly. And I encourage everybody to really visit the webpage, because also very often there are links to GitHub and you can actually see the code. So it's a really, really, really nice resource. So please do check it out.
Okay, so my name is Régis Marodo. I'm working with the research department at AFD. And based on what you've heard, that is sort of setting what AI is capable of doing, and all the reservation also, and the cautiousness that one have to put when using these techniques, we have developed together with Jean-Baptiste Jacoutan a specific tool, AI tool, capable of mapping SDGs in any document. And so Jean-Baptiste did work with our data sciences team and is going now to present this tool to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Régis. So indeed, I'm going to present this tool, which I hope ticks a lot of boxes that were mentioned by our keynote speaker, being hopefully an impactful application of AI that was developed outside of big tech, since we developed it at the Agence Française de Développement, and which uses natural language processing, so AI applied to language. So what we've been hearing a lot during the past few days is that public development banks lack common methodologies to track the SDGs within their operations and within their strategy. And so starting from there, 2 years ago, we said, why not try to use AI to map the SDGs in public development banks' annual reports. So we developed the SDG Prospector, which acts like as a filter. So faced with a lot of information, the SDG Prospector focuses on the SDG component of a document. So to train the tool, we built a data set of 8,500, more than 8,500 paragraphs related to the SDGs. And based on this database, the tool trained to recognize the SDGs within a text. So when it analyzes a document, it parses the text in several paragraphs and then is able to tell whether a paragraph is related to 1, 0, or several SDGs. And then when compiling the information, we get a general overview of the SDG integration in this document. So as I said, the first type of application was to use it on Public Development Bank's annual reports. And so what we observed analyzing more than 230 banks, is that in the end, Public Development Banks are banks. So they mainly focus on the most productive SDGs, being SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth, SDG 9 on industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And then we see that biodiversity objectives or social objectives rank at the bottom. And this result is very consistent with other work that has been conducted. Other type of analysis. So here we identified a positive correlation between the asset size of public development banks and the way they integrate environmental SDGs. So I will not dive too much into the technicalities. You can find more in the paper that we published, and some of the papers are available in the room. But what's more important is that building on this seminal work, we published this year a website which is available online. So wherever you are in the world, you can access the SDG Prospector as we made the technology available. And so I will not present the tool live because of the connection. But of course, you're invited to visit the website. So you will see it's very easy to work with. You connect on the website, upload a document, and then you get an SDG analysis. So you can upload either project documentation, a strategy, you can conduct a portfolio analysis, and having this first layer of analysis of the main SDGs that are integrated in the document. So, for example, when analyzing a project, having an idea of what would be the impacts of the projects. Of course, this is a first layer of analysis relying on language analysis. And just to finish with, about the future developments of the tool, because we're not going to stop where we are. So at the moment, the SDG Prospector is able to find with precision the 17 SDGs, but now we will develop the tool so that it is able to also highlight the 169 targets of the 2030 agenda. At the moment, the tool works only on English documents, but we're also looking at multilingual applications. We're also trying to test the relevance and synergies of the SDG Prospector with other tools and large language models such as ChatGPT. And finally, we really want, so as I said, we started the SDG Prospector as a research project, and now we really want to see whether the SDG Prospector can be a robust tool to monitor extra financial activities. So also looking for partners to launch a pilot project on portfolio analysis. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Yeah. Congratulations for the timing, just, you know, at the second. I'm now turning to Elías Betancourt. Elías, parece que va a hacer su presentación en español, ¿verdad? Elías es el Group Director para Latinoamérica de AIS. Tiene más de 15 años de experiencia en consultancy projects y con artificial intelligence. Entonces, te dejo la pantalla.
Vale.
Por favor.
Bueno, gracias. Lo voy a hacer en español y me voy a parar. Perdonen. Vale, gracias por la oportunidad de estar acá, a toda la organización. Para empezar, vamos a compartir algunos datos que quizás ya muchos conocen, pero nos dan contexto de cuál es la situación de América Latina, sobre todo, en términos de inclusión financiera y crédito productivo, ¿no? Entonces, en la TAM, solo 3 de cada 10 adultos tienen acceso al crédito en el sistema financiero formal. Y solo 4 de cada 10 MIPYMES obtiene financiamiento de sus operaciones, ¿no? Entonces, como instituciones de desarrollo tenemos una deuda muy importante en apoyar la inclusión financiera y el financiamiento al crédito productivo. Y desde ICE creemos, y la práctica nos está demostrando, que hay ciertas herramientas tecnológicas que nos pueden ayudar, que pueden ser una llave para que empecemos a saldar esas deudas, ¿vale? Hoy nos vamos a focalizar en dos elementos. Uno es fuentes de información alternativa, fuentes de Open Data, ¿no? Dentro de eso hay una gran variedad, estuvieron recién repasando algunas. Nosotros creemos que una gran protagonista, que está empezando a hacerlo hoy, pero va a ser todavía más prioritario en los próximos años, es Open Finance, ¿no? Estas tecnologías por las cuales un solicitante de crédito, que es el dueño de la información, me puede autorizar a consultar sus datos operativos con otras entidades, que pueden ser entidades bancarias, pueden ser fintechs, pueden ser billeteras electrónicas, pueden ser empresas de servicios, ¿vale? Y no solo puedo consultar el comportamiento de pago, sino toda la información transaccional. Ingresos, gastos, acreditaciones, pagos, etcétera, todo el detalle. Es como si el solicitante, sea una empresa o sea una persona, me trajera su extracto bancario, su resumen de cuenta, con ese nivel de detalle. Solo que en vez de darme el extracto impreso, me va a dar acceso electrónico a que descargue toda esa información. Algo muy importante es, no es necesario que esté implementada la ley de Open Banking para trabajar con esta información. No es necesario que tengamos implementadas las APIs regulatorias para que lo podamos hacer. Ya esto hoy se aplica en países donde la ley todavía no está implementada, como Argentina, Chile, Colombia, México, ¿vale? De hecho, hace pocas semanas estuve con dos instituciones muy importantes de Colombia, uno de los bancos más grandes del país y otra de las microfinancieras más importantes del país, y los dos están decididos a empezar a utilizar Open Banking ya, para mejorar el acceso al crédito. Y el segundo tema es utilización de modelos Machine Learning, ¿no? Para sacarle el máximo rendimiento a todas estas fuentes de información. Cuando en una regresión logística estamos limitados a utilizar 10 o 15 variables, estos modelos nos pueden facilitar utilizar decenas o cientos, y no solo tener más información, sino encontrar relaciones implícitas entre esos datos, ¿vale? Entonces, tiene muchas ventajas. La principal es que me va a permitir incrementar el poder de predicción de los modelos. No voy a poder tener un mejor Gini. ¿Y qué quiere decir tener un mejor Gini en un modelo de admisión, ¿no? De rating o de scoring? Quiere decir que voy a poder llegar a más clientes y que voy a poder mejorar la mora de mi cartera. Tener un mejor Gini tiene un impacto directo en los resultados. Y en el último tiempo, este tipo de algoritmos dejó de ser una caja negra. Hoy sí tenemos las herramientas adecuadas, podemos interpretarlos, traducirlos, tener trazabilidad de las decisiones, documentarlos, evitar el sobreajuste, ¿no? Y eso nos abrió la puerta a implementar este tipo de modelos. Hoy lo tenemos hecho en riesgo en Argentina, en Chile, en Uruguay, en Colombia, en Perú, en México, y muchos de ellos ya supervisados por los reguladores. De hecho, venimos trabajando muy de la mano con los reguladores, principalmente Banco de España y Banco de Europa, en definir criterios, lineamientos para la interpretabilidad, para la trazabilidad de estos modelos avanzados. Entonces, muchas de las barreras tecnológicas al día de hoy ya es factible vencerlas, ya es factible superarlas. Y una de las principales que tenemos al día de hoy es el cambio cultural. Entonces, esto suena muy bien en la teoría, pero ¿qué pasa en la práctica? ¿Qué pasa en la realidad de las instituciones? Y para eso trajimos algunos ejemplos para contarles de aplicaciones reales en Latinoamérica, en distintos segmentos, en distintos tipos de instituciones, y son números calculados por esos bancos. De hecho, lo que los traje hoy ya lo fueron a presentar como caso de éxito representantes de estos bancos en un curso que hacemos anualmente con ALIDE, que se llama Inteligencia Artificial para la Inclusión Financiera y el Desarrollo. Simplemente se los voy a compartir el día de hoy. Entonces, el primero es de una institución que empezamos por Chile, pero tiene presencia regional, después lo expandieron a Colombia y a Perú. Y ellos querían tener un modelo que les permita precalificar créditos para no clientes, o sea, personas que no tenían comportamiento de pago con la entidad. Entonces, con ellos primero hicimos un relevamiento muy exhaustivo de todas las fuentes de información, internas y externas, y para que se den una idea, en Chile se desarrolló un lago de datos de unas 10.000 variables. En otros países, como Perú o Colombia, unas 6.000. Ahí ya aceleró. 21 segundos. Entonces, el primer gran resultado, sector no bancarizado, clientes que no hacen hit, que no tienen buró, que normalmente no sabemos cómo evaluar. Al 82% fuimos capaces de pegarle al menos una fuente de información. ¿Vale? Gente que normalmente no está en el radar del sistema financiero tradicional. ¿Y eso qué nos generó? Que, por ejemplo, el Gini, el poder de predicción en ese segmento no bancarizado, sea igual al que tenían para toda la cartera anteriormente. Decíamos, más Gini, más clientes. Esta entidad que logró pasar de 1.8 a 3.6 millones de no clientes con ofertas precalificadas y de 30.000 a 45.000 tarjetas de crédito por mes. Eso manteniendo la mora. Ya estoy en rojo. Segundo caso, muy rápido, microfinanzas. Esto en Colombia. También, relevamiento de fuente de información, incorporación de información sociodemográfica del ejecutivo, de la sucursal, etc. 35 variables en promedio por modelo. Incremento de Gini, sector agrario, no cliente, arriba del 80%. No agrario, arriba del 40%. Pudieron, con la misma mora asumida, atender 20% más de microempresarios. Y el último y cierro, pymes. También Colombia, un banco líder del país. No solo desarrollamos modelos, sino implementamos una herramienta de digitalización del proceso de crédito, que suele ser muy artesanal. Lograron Ginis arriba del 60%, pero otros impactos muy importantes, ¿no? Por ejemplo, aumentaron en el 50% de las solicitudes los montos ofrecidos. Y eso es porque en vez de tener una regla, fueron a terminar una capacidad de pago a medida. ¿Vale? Y después en temas de tiempos, que sabemos que en Latinoamérica podemos tardar 3-4 semanas para dar un crédito pyme, lo redujeron un 80%. Para medianas empresas pasaron de 15 días a 3 días. Y al final lograron una automatización muy importante de las decisiones, ¿no? Solo una parte, la más compleja, por una instancia humana y lo demás se define automáticamente. Entonces esto te permite llegar a muchos más clientes con la misma estructura, ¿no? Entonces, un poco ya cierro, última frase. Estas instituciones están logrando con los mismos recursos mejorar la vida de millones de personas y miles de empresas gracias a la tecnología, ¿no? Entonces nuestra recomendación es inviertan en estos algoritmos y en los software, pero no solo a nivel tecnológico, capaciten a su gente y gestionen el cambio de cultura organizacional, porque estas tecnologías van avanzando súper rápido y los que no lo empiecen a incorporar va a ser difícil que puedan competir en los próximos años. Y ya estoy. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Elia. So, I would like to ask you a question. Could you please raise your hand if you're currently using ChatGPT, BARD, Llama, or any large language model at work? Okay. Now, I would like to ask you, could you raise your hand again if at your workplace there is a policy regarding the use of this large language model? Okay, so we have a lot less hands up, okay? There are actually three major problems regarding these large language models. The first one is, anyone? Security, so data privacy, right? We have no idea what's actually happening with the data. And second one, anyone? I'm sorry? Reliability. So for example, we actually have no idea where the answer comes from, right? It's like explainability, it's in black box, we don't know anything. And the third one, has anybody had hallucinations when you tried using it? You get totally random answers that actually look quite credible, right? So at the EIB, like Vice President Mourinho explained, we've actually played with different tools, but the ones we're going to present today are the ones that we can share because they rely on public data. For example, we're optimizing working capital with actually like now exchange, you know, we're optimizing that, but I cannot show you this because it's based on confidential information. So I'm going to show you two tools. The first one, so the first one is actually a chatbot, and what we're doing here, okay, un segundito Orlando, que voy a presentarlo y de ahí, muchas gracias. So the first one is actually a chatbot. So what we're doing here is that we are determining what the knowledge base is. So other than with ChatGPT, where you have no idea what it is, we're going to upload documents in Word, in PDF, or in CSV. In this example I'm giving you for obvious reasons, it's going to be public documents, right? And we're going to upload those. And after that, we actually can ask questions, and it will answer in the 24 EU languages. And it will actually tell us exactly what the reason is that it's choosing a particular answer, and it will show us the source for that. So, Orlando? So you see here in this particular case, we're going to choose an EIB impact report from 2020 and an EU drugs action plan. We're uploading those. We could upload anything we want as a knowledge base. And then next, we're going to actually choose which ones. We could filter that. We could say in this particular case, we just want to look at one report and we want to look at all. And we're going to ask a question, and you will see it even as a typo. We're actually about drag instead of drug, but it's smart, so it understands. So it will give us the answer, in this case, in English. And it will tell us where it's basing the answer on. Okay, so you actually can go directly to the source and see this is where it is. In the second example, it's coming up in a second, we are going to ask about SDGs. And in this case, actually, it's trying to figure out the different documents, but it's going to actually decide which one is more relevant. So if we, in this example, we had just 2, but if we had more, it's actually going to also work with different ones. And in the third example that we're going to have, it's again asking about the drug or drug plan, but we're going to ask it to answer in French. So for many institutions, this is really a great advantage that you can have the answer in any of the languages that you want. If we could stop just a second there, please. Gracias, Orlando. The second example I'm going to show you has to do with the automatic transcription of minutes. And you could use it in anything. Actually, we could have used it at this conference. So there's one more thing I should mention actually before. So with the chatbot, there's the question of data privacy, right? And so actually we can choose if we do it locally, in which case it is slower, but we're actually ensuring data privacy, which is what we are doing when we do it with private documents. So this is a really important decision. You can do it on the cloud, public documents, okay? It's quite cheap. On the cloud, it's like for 10 questions, it's less than $1 US cent. But if it's anything that is actually confidential, we do it locally, okay? What I'm going to show you next about the minute transmission, the minute transcription is that we have, for example, management committee meetings where very confidential information is being handled. And right now we have these meetings that take 8 hours, or imagine at this conference where we've been talking quite a lot, right? And right now there are 4 people sitting in these meetings taking notes. And after these notes, it takes them 4 days to write down all the notes, okay? So what we're going to do now is that actually we're going to record the meetings, and then it's actually going to work quite fast. So after this one, that one is coming. We didn't upload the video because it takes a bit, so you will see it already kind of uploaded and transcribed. So this is the end of the previous one, and now we're going to go to the next one. So you see here it's answering in French. And I should add one more thing about the one I'm going to show you. For the minute transcription, actually, interestingly, the best language it works it is Spanish. So our performance when people speak Spanish is higher than in the other languages. And there also, it's what I mentioned before. So we could do it locally or not. And whenever, given that is highly sensitive information, we're running it locally. So it takes a bit longer than if we were doing it in the cloud. So this is what I mentioned to you. So here we're going to choose something public, a speech done by President Hoyer. And like I said, usually we would upload the video, but in the interest of time, we're there directly. And then this actually has 2 parts. So first, it's the transcription part, but then it's also the part of summarizing it, right? So you want to, on the other side. And if you see there, it says local model and cloud model. And that's exactly what I was mentioning before. Depending on the confidentiality on what you're using it for, you want to use one or the other, and speed will differ. So, and there's one more thing, which is that it's not working yet, but in the future, we also want to make sure that it automatically recognizes who the speaker is, so that then also that will be reflected. So that was the speech that we had already uploaded. We generate these minutes. And then later on the other side where it says the report, it's another tool, which is a summarization tool. And I think that's enough for me here. I just would like to say one thing. If one thing that I would love to walk you away with today is that you need to have a large language model policy of some sort. We have some at the IB. We're happy to share it, but it's really crucial to avoid some sort of disaster. So with this, now we're going to start with our panel. Regis, do you want to start introducing our distinguished panel members?
Okay. So I was listening you intensively. So okay. So in the panel we have Kampeta Saingoza. So Kampeta is the CEO of the Rwandan Development Bank. She has a professional experience, extensive one, in the field of international development and more recently with the Rwandan Development Bank, which is going through a very interesting reform program and alignment. You've been also a participant to the FIX program from the very beginning, and we thank you very much for that. Then we have Mr. Daniel Perez Garcia. So Daniel Perez Garcia leads the equity investment in the IDB lab, startups, no? In IDB lab. It's an innovation laboratory that you are probably going to also present that IDB developed that is trying to drive innovation and inclusion for supporting early stage entrepreneurial solutions. Previously, you worked also in Banco Colombia Group, I think, in this very country, and you were the bank's corporate for venture capital with that institutions. So we're also very pleased to have you with us. Then we have Mr. Sivasubramanian Raman. Did I do it well? Thank you, Mr. Raman. So you're working with SIDBI, which is SME Bank of India. You're also a member, your bank is a member of IDFC, one of the founder of that. So we have the pleasure also to have you on board since the very beginning of the process on the question of the specificity for development banks, of aligning their models with the ambition of the transition. And then, lastly, we have Mr. Garcia. Miss Garcia, sorry, Miriam Gassa. Pleased to welcome you. You are the Associate Director of the Policy Engagement at CDP in Latin America. You also have extensive experience in international, in managing projects, project management, and you have an expertise in global environment governance with a particular focus on climate change, which is, of course, very relevant to our discussions. So this being said, I think we can enter into the first panel discussion. So, maybe I start with you, Kampeta, with the first question. I think we'd be interested to see your viewpoint and discuss some of the key successes with data analysis and potential machine learning that you have at the Development Bank of Rwanda.
Thank you very much. This has been a very insightful session. I feel like I've learned a lot already. And this is what the spirit of FIX is us learning from each other. So thank you very much for having me here today. So the Development Bank of Rwanda is a national public development bank, fully owned by government. And about half of our balance sheet is actually managing government funds for different partners. Some of them are in the room. And as a CEO, when I hear about AI and machine learning and, all the technical terms that we've been hearing today, the first thing is how does this relate to service delivery and which problem is it fixing for me? And at the Development Bank, one of the biggest problems that we had was actually managing the scholarship fund on behalf of government, which has about 30,000 students, which are my clients now with microloans, and to whom we had to disburse money on time, but also recover money on time. This has been a challenge, especially in terms of customer care. My mom always used to say, the two most different clients that you can get are the farmers and the students, because they're very clear about what they want, and they don't have time for stories. So the challenge was, how do we use now technology to provide a better service to these 30,000 clients who were fairly disgruntled with the way they were getting their scholarship funds. And the first thing was really to use this as an opportunity to review all our processes, whether you're talking about from application all the way to disbursement, accountability, and recovery. And the role that the development bank had to play, which was quite a painful role, to be honest, was really around data quality. And I like the point that was done by the first presenter, which is the importance of data. So we really focused on how do we ensure data quality, not only for ourselves as a development bank, but also for other stakeholders, such as the Ministry of Education. And then the second point was, once we had better data around the students, was really to see how can we have integration points with other government agencies. So typically the Revenue Authority, to know if they have a job or not, to know if they can repay their loans or not, having data points with the national ID system to make sure that at the point of registration, we can ease the process for them. How can we have data points with the Social Security so that we know if they're contributing to a pension fund? Because the idea is the students only repay the loan once they have a job. So you have to figure out, how do you know that they have a job? So integration was a key point when it comes to data analysis and integration to other services. Right now, this is helping us in our other business lines. So we are about to have an agri-tech product, and having this over 20 data points of integration is going to be very crucial. And then the third thing was really to use BRD as a first customer for data science companies that are in the ecosystem in Rwanda. Many had, the dreams that I see now being done by larger DFIs, but they didn't have a first client to really be the test, to be a test bed for their solution. So we committed as BRD to be their first client and be able to use their services appropriately. And then lastly, but more also very importantly, is the issue of data certification. Being able to be a market shaper and show the other banks in Rwanda how to do data protection in a way that's responsible, having the policy, walking the journey towards ISO certification, and showing that you can actually embrace all these new technologies, but without sacrificing data privacy. So those are the key pillars of what we've managed to do. We've managed to do it for education, for affordable housing. We're now starting a program around agriculture finance, and we're expanding to the sectors of interventions of the bank. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting. Daniel, so we heard in the opening remarks by Vice President Mourinho that there are some challenges, right? Fairness, that we don't have discrimination, explainability. We also heard that in the keynote. So how is the IDB Lab prioritizing the ethical use of AI, and why is this important to you in the work that you do?
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you all for joining us. So, as we all know, technology is a very powerful tool for accelerating development, but it also comes with risks in perpetuating inequalities and exacerbating exclusion of marginalized groups. And for artificial intelligence in particular, as it is being very rapidly adopted, because of all of the benefits that we know in terms of productivity and all the attention that is having for the breakthroughs in machine learning and generative AI, it also comes with challenges that we've been discussing in terms of data privacy, and more specifically in systematizing and scaling biases. And that's something that we really care about. We have seen examples of AI bias with different processes, such as the use of recruitment machine learning algorithms in hiring new employees in big corporates, and that has consolidated exclusion in gender and race. So in the Innovation Lab of the Inter-American Development Bank Group, we believe that responsible AI practices are essential to harness the benefits of AI while mitigating the risks and ensuring equity in the process. So that's why in IDB Lab, together with the social sector of IDB, we are co-leading an initiative called FAIRLAC, or Fair AI in Latin America and the Caribbean, which aims to ensure the ethical and responsible use and development of technology, including artificial intelligence, of course. So in the public sector, the initiative focuses on enhancing social services, reducing inequality, and collaborating with national governments for regulation and AI strategies. And in the private sector, IDB Lab leads the promotion of ethical AI with various stakeholders, particularly in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. In fact, IDB Lab, as the venture arm of the IDB Group, has been investing and supporting VC fund managers and entrepreneurs for the last 30 years. And having that in mind, we have prioritized the ethical use of AI in two main strategies. One is incorporating AI ethics risk assessment in all the investments that we do in the due diligence process, and also co-creating tools that can be used by our clients. So for the VC fund managers, we created a tool called Fair Venture that help managers analyze the non-financial risks of AI in every investment that they are reviewing. And for entrepreneurs, we developed a tool called Fairlag 3S, which is a self-assessment tool that entrepreneur uses to assess business operations, models, products, and services, and particularly the AI risks that they have in those processes. So we help them analyze this in 3 dimensions that are the solution, the system, and of course the impact that they have in society, addressing business value, the transparency of their algorithms, and the social impact. And let me finish with one example of the impact of this tool in one of our portfolio companies. So we invested 2 years ago in Slang, which is a B2B edtech that focuses on professional English for SMEs, corporates, and unemployed population. We work with our Fairlag tool and team with Slang and help them include underrepresented population in the data that they are using for running their algorithms, and also not considering socioeconomic variables when they are building their content for the courses in English. So this has helped Slang not only make more ethical product and algorithms, but also enhancing the engagement that their users and clients have with the platform, and have very good results in general with their clients. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Well, yes, definitely seems that this ethical question should come along with the development of artificial intelligence. It was very interesting to hear your insights on that. I'm now turning to Mr. Rahman to see whether you have concrete examples of impactful data analysis, maybe also machine learning initiatives for the Small Industries Development Bank in India, especially relating, if I understand, to financial inclusion.
Thanks. So I don't remember having pre-suggested that question, but that question is very relevant to SIDBI. So thanks to the professor who sort of laid the context, saying that AI is not magic and ML is really about teaching the machine. And thanks to you, my friend, your words in Spanish were like, music to my ears. We have actually done something extremely similar. So what is it that we want from the technology? There are 2 things. One is to increase the flow of credit, and the second is to reduce the risk. So it's like having your cake and eating it too. Now, we actually have an associate company, which is a fintech company. They received over 250,000 applications from SMEs on a platform that we had created. And we actually got them to study those data points. So exactly the way you spoke about it, it's a triangulation of 3 sets of data. The GST information of that SME entity, the income tax records, and the bank statement. Now, this was analyzed from the records that we received at the application stage. Out of those 250,000, 100,000 plus got loans, and they were studied and tracked as to where those loans were in what state, in stress or default or whatever it might be. So in this manner, we've actually created a risk scoring card. And I think that's exactly what you were talking about. So today we have got the ability, and we've tested it in SIDBI for the last 6 months, where we do not have manual intervention for loans given to SMEs for buying machinery, because machinery is fairly routinized, as routine as the data is. So for routine assets that are procured by SMEs. We have just a scorecard based on certain, sort of go, no-go criteria. So each one of these data points has got translated into a particular score from 0 to 10. We look at the credit bureau score, which also has a probability of default. These 3 data points triangulate to a probability of default. And therefore, we're just on an algorithm-based system. We have probability of default of 1 and probability of default of the triangulated data. And therefore, if you cross that hurdle, you get a loan. And this entire thing is a matter of 15 minutes. So it's more of putting in the data. So the customer has to put in the data. So we're trying to now pull the data directly from the GST system, but till that does not get fully refined. So what we are really talking about is the power of the data, which as we go forward is periodically getting added on and refined. And therefore, we have the ability to look at various variables of demographic nature. We have variables of financial nature, of repayment nature. And when you put the two together, you can actually predict, you can create buckets and patterns of that data, where you're then segregating SMEs across the spectrum, which does get developed when the data is analyzed. So out of 350 cases that we've done for both SIDBI's existing customers as well as new customers, and the new customers is really where the challenge is, we've managed to find that we have about an equal number of existing customers and new customers. 70% of existing customers got a loan within 15 minutes of the sanction was made in 15 minutes, and about 45% of new customers were sanctioned a loan. Now, it's excellent data because I'm very happy that we have a rejection rate of 55% of new customers. Now we're further tweaking the model to be able to understand whether we are being too strict or not. And therefore, it's really something which when we started, we didn't even think it was AI. It was just about getting your data to, give you the predictive value. So this is really for the formal economy. We then got more bold and we said for the informal economy, which is where they don't have ITR, they don't have GST data, they probably have a bank statement. Now, how do we start giving loans to those entities which typically do not get loans from bank finance? So they get loans from the shadow banks, or what we call as the microfinance institutions. And therefore, we started this. In 15 months, we gave 100,000 loans to such entities for loan amounts which were roughly about $1,000. And using this 100,000 successful loans given, we're now looking at the pattern recognition in those 1,000 and 100,000 loans, and now figuring out that what is the alternate data that we need in terms of demographics. So there's a lot of data that's collected by our partners on the ground. So, and all this is fed onto a screen. And it goes into even, how many people live in the house, who are the earners, who are the guys who are actually working, how many kids in school, how many assets of, maybe a two-wheeler or whatever it is. So, the more data you're collecting, and as he said very correctly, we're talking about 15 to 20 data points, so you're talking about 80 to 100 data points. And it makes a huge difference when you sort of move, and try and capture more data. So, the end of it, finally, the technology is serving the purpose of being able to give loans at a lower risk, and therefore you're being able to price the risk better because you have more information, and the more loans that you give, the richer is your data set, and then you can analyze that data better. So, this is really what we've done, and I would be very happy to sort of challenge our system with what you've done, and it would really be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So there's exactly what we wanted to create today, avenues for collaboration. But then also let's remember what we've heard before. We still have to make sure that fairness works, right? So we have more training data, but we have to make sure that we're not perpetuating biases there. And Miriam, we've heard a lot today about that data matters. And do you really have experience in this? You help local and public actors exactly in gathering data. So I would like to ask you, in your experience, what are the main data challenges when it comes to measuring environmental impact? How does CDP help? And then, since we're running a bit late and we are the only thing that stands between you and lunch, after Miriam, I would like it if the speakers could give short advice about lessons learned, the things that you might have done wrong at the beginning, that you wish you would have different, and maybe also, like you were saying, you know, actually, this would be great to collaborate on this and so on. So, Miriam, please.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I completely agree with my colleague Campeta. It was a very insightful panel. So CDP was founded more than 2 decades ago with the ambition to transform capital markets through reporting standards related to climate. So we were seeking for good data for better decision. What is CDP today? CDP is a platform for companies, cities, states, regions, that they can use it to report environmental actions and policy. Our annual report model is based on the most advanced frameworks, such as TCFD. Next year, we're going to have our questionnaire fully aligned with ISSB, and we are also connecting our questionnaires with UN campaigns, such as Race to Zero and Race to Resilience. CDP numbers show that there is growing interest in transparency and disclosure. Last year, we had an increase of 38% in disclosing numbers compared to 2021. Over the globe, all around the globe, more than 1,000 subnational governments reported their data to CDP last year. For you to have like a better understanding of what kind of data, this data is related to mitigation actions, adaptation actions, governance, but also projects that cities are trying to find a finance, so that's very relevant for this audience in terms of cities' climate finance. They've reported more than 80,000 urban environmental actions, such as energy efficiency or green space, just last year. Collecting data from subnational governments is critical, as cities are responsible for 70% of GHG emissions, global GHG emissions. For us at CDP, it's also a matter of people. The well-being of people is critical when we think about the threats of climate change. So, for example, 4 out of 5 cities reported last year that they are facing significant climate hazards, such as extreme heat, heavy rainfalls, among others. So how to overcome the barriers to have more transparency from subnational governments? Incentives from multilateral development banks and public banks is crucial. The European Investment Bank has a partnership with CDP, and they have endorsed the disclosure for 2023. As MDBs are financing a great part of climate actions for cities, the partnership and endorsement for disclosure echoes a lot with cities. But the challenge of subnational data collection can be different from Europe to Latin America, to Africa, to Asia, and other regions. For us, in our experience, CDP is a global organization, and the Global South, there are challenges related to human and financial resources. For example, only in Brazil, we have more than 5,000 of municipalities. You can be sure that they do not have the same level of amount of people working in their environmental secretariats. So making sure that we have systematized data, it's also better for the cities. One challenge that we also face when collecting data from cities is that climate change data is spread in different municipality secretariats. So you have the finance secretariat, you have sometimes education, sometimes environmental, sometimes green spaces, and the information is not necessarily systematized in a way. So when you ask a city to report, the design a person to report to CDP, and this person needs to talk to at least another 10 to gather the data, and this is time consuming. So how can we use the fact that once the city reports to CDP, the data is stored, and then the next year is only to update. And also, I think another challenge is related to the lack of granular data. So we had someone from the World Bank talking about companies. We have the same problem for subnational governments. So how can we use open databases that are national, international, or from civil society to make sure that cities can have access to that data. Sometimes making sure that they have GHG inventories can be very expensive, but using data that provides the emissions for cities, we have one in Brazil, for example, can support the city to have a better understanding of data and report to CDP. So for us, innovation is based on the insights that we can get from data, and collaboration is critical to advance climate action at subnational level.
Yeah, thank you very much. So as was suggested, we're getting to the end of the session, and we don't want to be too late for lunch. So I suggest that we give to all our panelists 2 minutes to comment on the questions that Andrea asked. And I would add maybe one insight I would like to hear from you is what do you think the potential of using artificial intelligence to measure not only the performance of your customer, etc., but extra financial criteria such as alignment with climate, biodiversity impacts, or these type of things in your portfolios. Daniel, shall we start with you for the concluding remarks?
Sure. So a couple of things. We are using AI for helping us develop the KPIs that we are going to measure for our portfolio in terms of impact, and when we are structuring our, the transactions, and that comes from the data that we, of course, already have. And I didn't want to miss the opportunity to highlight that we are very proud co-founders of the Development Data Partnership that Holly presented. So we alone have worked in 35 different projects with the partnership. 7 have been completed. We've been using data from different private organizations, including LinkedIn, and in fact, LinkedIn data has been super helpful for our labor markets observatory and has helped us develop different studies for reviewing how the labor market has evolved in the region after COVID and how telework has been adopted in our beneficiary countries. So yeah, just inviting you all to check that partnership, and we can't wait to welcome the EIB to the group.
Thank you so much. Miriam, do you want to tell us your remarks? And also, it would be great if you would just say these are the biggest challenges we've had, and this is how we've overcome them, and everybody can learn from that.
Of course, I think one of the biggest challenges is the quality of data. So when we ask for more data for corporates, for financial institutions, and private financial institutions and subnational government, they are willing to disclosure, but sometimes it takes time to have good quality. So I think one way to overcome this, it's making sure that we have toolkits, that we have the necessary information in terms of what we are, because in the CDP questionnaire we have specific questions, but sometimes this is not the reality of the public servant responding to the questions. So make sure that we can raise awareness of what we are asking. It's a way of making sure that we are going to get the good information. So being clear in what we are asking can be very, very important. And also making sure that what we understand, for example, as jurisdictional or landscape approach for forest is the same understanding here in Colombia, Brazil, Congo, and Indonesia, because comparable data is also important for us.
Very good. So, Mr. Rahman, do you want to take the floor?
Yeah, I just wanted to share with all the NDBs and everybody in this room that recently a very interesting statistic came to my attention. So we're running this very large credit guarantee program with the World Bank to support two-wheeler and three-wheelers in electric vehicles. So let me just give you a sense of, we have 300 million vehicles in India. And by 2030, we are supposed to convert 30% of all vehicles to become EV. As of date, we have 2 million vehicles which are EV, and we need to reach 90 million. So, there's a huge gap, and it's totally, on the sustainability front. And where we are working with the World Bank is to try and create this large credit guarantee scheme whereby the entire lending sector goes into the EV space. And when we say EV in India, it's not really the four-wheeler so much, but the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler, which are actually commercial, beasts of burden. So, you have two-wheelers and three-wheelers actually being used by nearly every business family which is in business for transportation purposes. And therefore, what's very interesting is that how do you price the risk of the EV? Because it is more expensive. It's about 50% more than the cost of an ICE. And therefore, it's very interesting that the battery which is put into the EV actually emits something called telematics. Now, some of you around the room might be aware that there is actually a SMS, similar to an SMS, there's a message that comes back to the owner of this vehicle. And therefore, if I'm financing this vehicle, I can ask for the owner to give me the messages that come back. And these messages relate to the state of the battery. So you can imagine that we have got millions of two-wheelers and three-wheelers with batteries giving out a signal every, I think it happens every 6 hours or 12 hours, but that can also be programmed. And therefore, you have this enormous data, which when viewed alongside the type of person who is using that EV and the industry in which it's being used, you're being able to price the risk of usage so much better. So, and you can actually be, you're in a situation where you can know that this particular vehicle has been, sort of ridden very roughly, it has been misused, and therefore you have the ability to increase the insurance that a particular insurance company could price. So I'm just saying that this is very interesting in terms of big data. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And actually that raises a point that our Vice President mentioned, but we haven't gone much into. So this really depends on the regulatory landscape. So in Europe, that would not be allowed because of GDPR. We have personal data, and that opens another whole can of worms. So this is another thing. We didn't have the time today, maybe next time, but that's something really relevant. We would not be allowed to do that here. Campetta.
Thank you very much. My head of HR likes to say, you don't know what you don't know, and that's probably the biggest problem that we have, in the sense that our business units are facing challenges every day in terms of pricing, in terms of product design, in terms of finding ways to ensure that the bank continues to be relevant to the real challenges, socioeconomic challenges that we face. And clearly the realm of technology solutions is humongous, and it expands every day. And I like what the professor from the first presenter, who was it? McGill, yes, was mentioning, which is, how do we make sure that we don't get distracted and we really pick the right solution to the right business problem that we're trying to fix, or socioeconomic problem that we're trying to fix? So I would say that's almost my biggest problem, because now we have a variety of solutions. And of course, the tech guys in-house have, a lot of ideas about what should be done. But how do we make sure that the conversation between business and tech kind of leads to a solution that has an impact on SDGs? The second one is really the right partnerships, and I think this is why this particular session is so insightful, because it helps you kind of ground all these possibilities into what could really be impactful. And I really thought the first presentation is something that I wanted to follow up on for McGill, to try to see how do we focus on solutions that are impactful and that have already a proven track record, and make sure that we're not distracted. Yeah. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. I think we're restarting a dialogue here, and hopefully we will continue talking offline. There's one more thing I wanted to mention. We talked a lot about fairness and discrimination, and I think especially in the businesses we do, it's really important. And so about what the IDB Lab said, there are actually two tools that are open source, available to anyone. One is FairLearn, the other one is AIF 360. They were initially developed by Microsoft and IBM, And it's actually quite easy to use. So I think at least if we start using those, we can already make quite a bit of progress on the fairness front. So we've reached the time limit. We can continue conversations afterwards and at lunch.
Yes, together with Andrea, I want to thank all of you for this participation. With maybe a final note that, you know, in the financial sector, we have so many algorithms deciding at the microsecond whether you want to sell a share, whether you want to invest in a bond or whatever. I'm always thinking that on the extra financial criteria, on the SDGs, on climate, on biodiversity, on gender equality, as you say, on a series of questions of ethical, I think we have a revolution coming, that all this can be transformed into data. We've seen how difficult it is to generate this data, but we've also seen that it is not out of reach. So I'll finish with maybe with this nice prospect for us development banks. Thank you very much to all.
I would like to mention a very last thing. So at the AAB, we're starting a new seminar exactly on this. So anybody who would like to participate, it will be always online. We're happy to have you on board. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you.